genuinely feel what happened was I felt something shoot up from the base of my spine all the way to the top of my head, and there were shivers, and then that was it. And then it went back down, and I was like, ooh. I remember thinking like, wow, like what have I just experienced? We were just allowing the energy to move through us, because it's Shakti, it's divine feminine energy. It's sexual energy combined with prana, life energy. And I think the mistake is that a lot of people, when they're first coming across Kundalini energy, is that they think it's just sexual, but it's not. The Kundalini energy is yours, it's no one else's. And it's this divine, intelligent force that knows exactly what you need in the moment that you need it, because you're ready to elevate. If we do want true growth, we do want true healing, we must allow our hearts to be awakened as well. You have to surrender to yourself. It's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows, and I really want to crush that as a myth, that energy healing is always something that's painful and quite dark, because it isn't always like that, and it isn't always going to be light and love and pure joy. It's duality.
Hello everyone! Today I've got lovely Kiren with me, and we're going to talk about all things Kundalini activation, because Kiren is a Kundalini activation practitioner. So Kiren, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to be here.
I am so excited for this chat because I think when we spoke first time on the phone, I mentioned to you that there were a lot of synchronicities about Kundalini for me.
Yeah.
So you came just at the right moment, and we're going to debunk all the Kundalini stuff today, because it feels like it's becoming a buzzword on the internet. Mm-hmm. I'm sure people have a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings. So yeah, I'm super, super excited about it.
Me too. I can't wait to get into it.
All right. Well, I suggest we get straight into it then. Mm-hmm. What is actually Kundalini?
Really good question. So Kundalini is your life force energy. It's the energy that resides deep within your body, near the base of your spine, close to your root chakra. And often what we say is that Kundalini is depicted like a coiled snake. And so what happens is that when you awaken it, what happens is that the snake starts to uncoil, unspiral itself, and starts to rise through your different chakra points, your nadi points, and flows from the root all the way up to the crown, and then the energy flows back down. So the flow of energy is very much a cycle. And it's through that rising that so much clearing can happen from our physical bodies, our mental bodies, all of the other subtle bodies that we have too. And so what we say when we go through training in particular or do Kundalini activations is that there's so much healing that can happen from that, because you're shedding all the things that no longer serve you. And the beautiful part about it is that the Kundalini energy is yours, it's no one else's. And it's this divine, intelligent force that knows exactly what you need in the moment that you need it, because you're ready to elevate. So that is in essence what it is. We also call it Shakti, power, divine life force energy. And the Vedic texts say that this is a very divine feminine energy, because Kundalini is all about creation, intuition, and just the flow of life. And so when you do go through various awakenings or activations, for example, you often find that you become deeper connected to your creative abilities, to your intuition. And it's not to say that it's something that only women can access. No, it's the energy that we all have, men and women, within each of us. And so anyone can tap into that aspect, just as we have both masculine and feminine energies within.
You said incredible things in there. And I mean, this is going to be a super interesting chat, as I anticipated. Mm-hmm. And when you were talking about Kundalini, I really loved that you were talking about the clearings and the healings. Yeah. And I know that the listeners will want to know what kind of healings and clearings can happen. Yeah. Would you mind expanding on that just a little bit?
Totally, I would love to. As I said, when the Kundalini rises through your body, it will naturally start to shed various energies within you that you may have stored. So from like traumas that you've experienced as a child to where you are at present moment in life. And I just want to emphasize that trauma doesn't need to be like this huge thing. I mean, it can be a small trauma, but it can have such a profound impact on our life, right? And so it can essentially complete various trauma cycles. In terms of healing, what happens during an activation is that you may find that there are a lot of emotions that come up, you know, from deep tears, anger, frustration, guilt, shame, and it's all for you to actually be able to release it. So the beauty about doing Kundalini activation is that when you're with an actual practitioner that's able to hold that space for you, they'll be able to guide you through that process. So for example, I want to emphasize as well, Kundalini activation process, or rather Kundalini activation transmissions, are very different to Kundalini yoga and Kundalini breathwork, because the latter two essentially force the energy to awaken. So what we say is that there's a right hand path for how to activate the Kundalini, which one could say is a little bit more masculine. So there are things like doing the breath work, like Kundalini meditation, like Kundalini yoga, where you're actively having to do something in order to engage the Kundalini energy. Whereas we say Kundalini activation, which is what I do, and so many other practitioners that are around, it's a very soft and gentle awakening process. There's no forcing that's happening. Essentially, myself as a practitioner is just holding the space, the energy within myself, and being a channel through that. And then your Kundalini energy will recognize that frequency of energy, and it will naturally activate. And so it will that's why we say it's very gentle, because it's not shooting straight up from the base of your spine all the way to the top of your crown and going back down. No, it's like a subtle awakening. It's peeling away all of the layers of conditioning that we also have within ourselves, you know, whether it's societal, religious, familial, all of those good things. And that takes time as well. So we often say, if you're very new to this practice and you've never done anything like this before, and you're very within your mind, it may take a few sessions, for example, for you to just de-armor, because that's what the energy is doing. It's de-armoring all the clutter that's within your mental body. And so it doesn't mean it's not working. In fact, it's always working within. It's just allowing you to go deeper and deeper within the energy and start to connect deeper back to your own consciousness, back to your divine source. So when I speak about healing, I speak about it from so many different avenues. Like, you've got the emotional and mental healing, you've got the physical healing. For example, I had a client who slipped a disc in his back. And during a transmission, what happens is that you're just lying down, and what happens is that me as the facilitator, I'll play some soul invoking music, like very emotive music, and just hold that space, hold that energy. Whether it's online or in person, it works the same, because there's no time or space in the quantum field. But naturally, the energy will awaken. If we're in person, then I may tap different points on your body, different chakra points, or different nadis that the energy is calling me to do. And intentionally, you can equally do that online. But I share that to say that he was with me for a specific cohort I was running for men only. And towards the end, he was just like, I felt so light. I haven't been able to move my body this whole time. But throughout these processes and transmissions that we've been having together, I feel like I'm lifted out of my body, and I feel energized, and I feel connected to something more than me. And so, yeah, I would say that there is an element where it can support physical healing as well. And that's just one part of the benefit. You know, when we're talking about, typically when we talk about energy healing, it's almost like, oh, there's something wrong with us, or we're trying to clear negative emotions. And yes, that is very true as well. But equally, the Kundalini energy almost purifies our mind in a way where we're able to think more clearly, we're able to make better decisions in our life. It brings us to a higher frequency where we may find that our tastes even change, whether it's from certain foods or certain habits that we have in our life, to even the people that we hang around with. Because we've now elevated to a different frequency, we may find that now we're no longer in alignment with these things. And it's not to say that those things were bad, but it's just to say that we're just on a different vibration now. And actually, that's a great thing, because you want to be elevating in life, right? And so I think one of the most beautiful experiences for me was, it just allowed me to equally tap into my creative body, and tap in more to my intuition, and be able to trust myself more throughout the process, because I've been working with energy for about a year now. And I just think it's wonderful. And I think once you start to surrender to the process, because often that can be the hardest part during a transmission, where, you know, you're lying there on a mat, and, you know, the practitioner's there, and you sometimes see videos of people having Kundalini activations, and you see them moving around, or, you know, they're, you know, making noises or whatever. Like, each expression is very natural and normal. But I remember when I was actually in Bali, and I literally stumbled across a Kundalini activation transmission. I didn't know what it was. I was somewhat familiar with the Kundalini energy, but I didn't really know enough about it to know what I was getting into. And so I thought, oh, I'm only here for another few days. Why don't I just go and try? And I remember Sophie, my teacher and friend now, was there saying, it's about trusting and surrendering, quietening your mind and focusing deeper within your physical body and just allowing yourself to breathe. And whenever finding that your mind is mentally chatting away, just coming back to the breath, coming back to your body, and just trusting and surrendering that you're being divinely held in the moment, and that whatever you're meant to receive in that moment is going to happen. And I remember, I kid you not, Veronica, it was an hour transmission itself, like the actual process. And I felt like for 55 minutes, I was in my head. I was like, why isn't anything happening? Why am I not moving? So much chatter going on. And I just remember literally at the end, I was like, you know what? Let me just breathe and just going to surrender and let go. And whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And literally the minute I did that, my hand started to move. And it wasn't like anything was taking over my hand. It was just that I had removed that block in my own mental mind to allow the energy to go and do whatever it needed to do. And so, yeah, it was just a really funny but beautiful process. And I share that story to say, it's very natural to be very in the mind the first time you do it. But
how was your hand moving?
It was just kind of just making patterns and movements.
And you weren't consciously controlling the movements of your hand?
No, not at all. It wasn't a scary thing like, oh my God, what's moving my hand? It was more like, it felt very natural. It felt very, very natural. And so I remember thinking wow, what have I just experienced? It was so interesting because you stay within your own energy when you're doing group transmissions as well. There are other people around you, but you don't notice anyone. And I remember leaving Bali, coming back to the UK and wanting to keep listening to that music more and more. I was just like, I just want to be in that energy again. Not in terms of just the hand moving, but my mind was somewhere else. I literally felt like I was connected to something more. When we speak about Kundalini activation, one of the other benefits that you get are these states of non-duality. So you feel like you're out of your physical body, you're out of your mental body because you're back in alignment with source. There's this truth of oneness in the universe that we each have. But when we're here living on this physical plane, you can't help but feel very closed down and just in your own ego, well, if I don't have this, then who am I, for example? If I'm not Kiren that's sitting here wearing these clothes, doing what she does for work, then who is she?
Yeah, that's the eternal question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of where you were leading to, that there's no duality. You're not Kiren, I'm not Veronica. We all came from one. We're all one. Just, being expressed in different ways. And the first time you hear this, it feels very woo-woo, feels very out there.
Yeah.
But the more you study those different things and the more realizations you have yourself, you're like, damn, actually, that's right. There is no me, there's no you, there's just one.
Yes.
The total number of minds in the universe is one, if you think about it.
Yes, totally. And when I think about religions, for example, I always say I believe in everything because all religions are, when you strip it back to its purest essence, are paths on how to love one another, ourselves, and unfortunately it's human beings that really destroy that essence. And so yeah, when I think when I speak about these types of things and I have different clients coming in, I try and emphasize that this is not a religious thing. Anyone can access this energy because it's yours. It's your divine birthright to have this energy. It's within you for a reason, no?
Absolutely. Wow. I love the way you just phrased it. And actually, that's a very good point, because I always sometimes assume that people have heard about these things, that people are kind of similar to us, into spirituality, into yoga, all those different things.
Yeah.
But of course, so many people are born into a religion. They are religious. They sometimes are closed off to other spiritual traditions and practices.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing the light into that. And yeah, it's how is this religious? It's just an energy, right?
Totally. Yeah, I've had so many people from different backgrounds, and even the people that I was learning and being initiated into this process with, they each had their own religious views and backgrounds, but they were still able to experience the energy. And so it's for us as human beings to just be a little bit more open and to understand that we don't know everything. We're not gods. We are not perfect. And actually, if we do want true growth, we do want true healing, we must allow our hearts to be awakened as well in that process. So that's what I would say about that.
I do want to go back to everything you were sharing before we kind of diverted into this. And the one thing that I loved you talking about is Kundalini yoga and breathwork. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what I took away is that the Kundalini activation that you practice is a more gentle way of awakening the Kundalini, whereas Kundalini yoga practices, they're more almost forceful, and they will shoot up the Kundalini, you said, straight up from the spine up to your your highest chakra.
Yes.
But then could you explain how then the Kundalini activation works? So would it be kind of slowly rising up your chakras? Why is it more gentle?
Really good question. Really, really good question. I would say, so let me touch back on it. Yes, Kundalini breathwork and Kundalini yoga, when done with the right practitioner, is very fruitful in awakening the Kundalini energy and activating it in a way. But what you're doing is you're forcing this energy to awaken. For example, with the breath work, you might be doing breaths like this. Can't remember the name of it, but
Kapalabhati?
it's like, I think so, yes.
Yeah.
And it's where you're essentially using your breath to force this energy to awaken. I actually think my Kundalini awakened a long time ago because I was doing a Joe Dispenza meditation, and funny enough, I can't find it anymore. And I was doing this breathing, and I genuinely feel what happened was I felt something shoot up from the base of my spine all the way to the top of my head, and there were shivers, and then that was it. And then it went back down, and I was like, oh, what is this? I didn't know what it was. But you find that there's very similar practitioners that speak about the energy in a different way, but they're all trying to get you to do the same thing in the sense of awakening your consciousness using your own self. So, for example, the reason that I say that it can be, what was I going to say?
Can be forced.
Yes. Yeah. So the reason that I say is that activities like breathwork and yoga can be more of a forceful way of awakening it is because you're actually doing that. You're actually deliberately trying to get the energy up to your crown chakra point. And so there's a lot of myths that Kundalini activation in this sense is very dangerous. And I would say it's not dangerous to a point where you could harm yourself. I would say it's more dangerous to the point where if you awaken this energy and you shoot it up and it comes out from your third eye and you get all of this like expansive consciousness going on, and then the energy comes back down, you could crash in a sense of you may feel extremely depressed because now you've awakened yourself, but you can't hold that energy anymore. And so you need someone that's actually qualified to be able to help you through that process. Whereas with Kundalini activation transmissions, it's very different because there's literally nothing for you to do. It's a very feminine energy. And so it is a gentle awakening. The energy is doing what it needs to do for you. So you're not forcing it to do anything. You're just allowing it to awaken and move through you, and it will go exactly where it needs to go. So, for example, I'll touch on my own experience. When I was having my first transmission in Bali, as much as I was in my mind, I felt very emotional. And I remember there was a point where Sophie touched, I think it was my solar plexus, and she just touched it and it felt like this energy just came out, and I just started crying. And so absolutely crying because I was holding so much within that chakra space, which meant that there must have been some kind of blockage there. And so for me, with these types of activations, they are gentle because what it's doing is it's just trying to work its magic around to loosen any knots or blockers that are there within your various chakra points or nadis, to allow it to move more gently into your crown or move gently up towards your crown and create that more balanced flow of energy within, which is why we say when you have multiple transmissions, it just allows you to work deeper and deeper in the energy. And what can happen during a transmission is, yes, you may release things emotionally, you may complete trauma cycles, you'll also get these deep realizations and understandings. You may also find that you see colors. You may feel experiences of being hot and cold. You may even see visions. You might even find that you're talking to consciousness and they're sharing their insights with you. It's so multifaceted, and honestly, this energy is forever evolving, because we as human beings are evolving. So how can we think that our Kundalini energy is going to be the same as it was 1,000 years ago? It's not. It's going to be different. It's divine intelligence. And what divinity wants us to do is elevate, to raise our consciousness, because the more we do that for ourselves, we create this ripple effect on others. And so just to circle back to my own personal story, where I said when I came back to the UK, I really wanted to listen to the same music. And then I was like, oh, I want to hold women's circles. So there's a safe space for us to share and to dance and to move our bodies in a way where we're not being sexualized. We're just allowing the energy to move through us, because it's Shakti, it's divine feminine energy. It's sexual energy combined with prana, life energy. And I think the mistake is that a lot of people, when they're first coming across Kundalini energy, is that they think it's just sexual, but it's not.
I actually haven't heard that before. That for me, it was always about tantra, like tantra being associated with something sexual, but I haven't heard that about Kundalini. So
Yeah.
that's very interesting.
Yes, yeah. A lot of people find, because the thing is that when you do awaken it, you do find these sensations where you feel deep senses of pleasure as well. And so often people just assume that it's just sexual energy, awakening sexual energy within your body. But it's not just that. It's so much more than that. It's life. And when you think about, for example, if you're thinking about how a baby is made, it's like life-giving energy as well as the sexual energy. Do you know what I mean? So it's a combination of everything, but I wouldn't tap too much into the sexual aspect about it. It's just life and power in its truest, most divine form. And so yes, when I came back, I was like, oh, I want to hold women's circles. And then I realized to myself, actually, what I really want to do is hold these transmissions for other people to be able to access this energy within. And it really lends on to my wider work, where ultimately I feel my mission in life is just to help people empower themselves and to show them that they have all of the power within. Yes, it's important to work with people, but it's to allow you to be able to go through those phases of healing, to get those support mechanisms, to actually learn the tools of how to do that. But ultimately, it's you that has to do the stuff. You have to do the work after. You have to be open to be working with this kind of energy, because it's yours. You have to surrender to yourself. So yeah, and then that's what happened. Long story cut short, that same week that I had that thought of I would like to be a Kundalini Activation facilitator, Sophie put on her story that she was doing her first training series, and I was like, this is in alignment. I have to go. And it just felt like everything fell into place. I didn't have to try. It was just like, yeah, this is what's going to happen. And I think the beauty about Kundalini energy is that she will guide you through so many different places, so many different paths that you never thought were possible for you to explore. So say, for example, you own your own business and you're wondering, is this the right thing? Am I living my dharma? Am I living my life purpose? She will guide you where you need to be. Even if you feel like, oh, it's a really long roundabout way, no. Divine timing is something that none of us will ever be able to predict or understand, because divinity works in such a way where, again, our small little human minds will never be able to truly comprehend the vastness of what's at work and why we are all collectively here to help and support one another, to raise our consciousness, which is why I say when you start to do these activations for yourself whilst working with a practitioner, it does create a ripple effect, because your energy is changing and therefore the energy around you is going to change.
I love it. And also about the point that divinity knows better than you. I always say God doesn't make mistakes.
Yeah.
So whatever you think, this is not going to my plan, this is not what I wanted it to be like, God doesn't make mistakes. There's a higher plan, there's a higher purpose to everything that happens around you.
Totally. Yeah. It's only when you're outside of that aspect that you can really feel like, oh, yes, everything was meant to happen for a reason. But when you're in the thick of it, you can often go into a victim consciousness state, which is so natural, by the way. We all have these tendencies, including myself, but I'm able to recognize it a lot more now and hold space for that. But it's like, we do feel like, oh God, like, why is this happening? I'm trying so hard. And it may just be that God is showing you that is not for you. Like, I love you so much and I want you to see that. And I'm going to guide you in a way that will bring you into alignment with where you are. But first, in order for me to put you here, you need to learn the lessons here, here, and here. So you're able to receive this bit with such an open heart and mind and with the intelligence that you've learned from going on this journey.
Wow. And we were talking before we started recording, and
Yeah.
you were saying how you really wanted to kind of share whatever is going to be channeled through you. And I really feel like that is being channeled. The information that you were sharing is just so on the dot. So yeah, thank you so much for holding this channel. And as always, I have more questions.
Yes, please keep them coming.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's such a deep topic, and we've only really barely scratched the surface.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, what would you say are the symptoms of Kundalini awakening when you haven't really activated it through a practitioner, but maybe through a meditation? So you mentioned your own experience, you felt like something was shooting up. But how can people really understand and differentiate that it's Kundalini versus something else?
I would say that it's a really good question. And I would also say that because we are different human beings, our own personal experiences will be very different. And I would say, when you know, in a sense of, yes, it may be that active shooting up from the base of your spine right to the top, and there's no denying what it is. But if you don't know what the Kundalini is, and you don't know that's the energy, then how would you know? You might think, oh, I'm having a back spasm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yes, there's that as that is probably the most common way that you can denote if your Kundalini is being activated through these practices like breathwork, yoga, and meditation. Equally, through a natural transmission, you may find your body is tingling, you may be feeling hot or cold, you may find that you're able to see visions, different colors as you're lying down. You'll know because you're just trusting. It's not of the mind, the Kundalini, to be perfectly honest. And I know that there are various people that are like, oh, I want to activate my Kundalini. I want to have a massive Kundalini awakening. And to that, I would say, be really mindful and intentional about what you're asking for, because this is divine energy. Just like when people work with master plants like Mother Ayahuasca, Ahasacha, and so on, even mushrooms, a lot of people are using it in a way where it's a, I don't want to say a fad because that's not the right word, but it's like what's the word that you use?
Panacea?
No, but like, where it's like a popular term, it's a trend or what's the word that I'm looking for?
Trend, like a hype.
Yeah, like it's in vogue at the moment
Yeah.
because, it's something new. And, for example, with Mother Ayahuasca, it's like, oh, you can have 20 years of therapy in one ceremony, blah, blah, blah. And I've only just recently had my first experience with Mother Ayahuasca. And let me tell you, if you're going there to be like, yeah, I'm like going to work with Mother Ayahuasca, it will be probably one of the most rudest awakenings that you've had, because she is a sacred teacher. She herself is divine energy, and also your Kundalini can awaken from having an ayahuasca experience, just as an FYI. But it's something to be treated with respect. That's the word that I'm looking for. Because when you are looking to activate and awaken your Kundalini, there has to be a humble planning and reason behind it. If you're going through a difficult time and you just want this energy to awaken within you, then that's an understandable thing. Through the transmission process, for example, if you want to force your energy to awaken because of all the benefits that I've listed before, awakening your consciousness, that feeling of non-duality, your psychic abilities being able to be more clearer, etc., that is also fair, but you have to ask yourself, why do you want that? Is it you that genuinely wants it? Or is it your ego just to say, yeah, I've awakened my Kundalini and I'm better than you? No, we're all human beings. Just because your Kundalini has been awakened doesn't mean that, you're God's gift to human beings. You have to actively work on keeping it awakened, through your life practices. How, are you meditating? What are your thoughts like? What is the food that you're eating even? What are you doing to enable your consciousness to expand? And it's probably similar in the tantric spaces. I find Tantra is really interesting because even when I was in Bali, you get these like Tantra bros that are like, oh yeah, like I do Tantra and da 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 da. And it's such
Really?
yeah.
It's a thing?
Such a thing.
Tantra bros.
Tantra. I mean, I think I made that name up myself, but I quite like it because it's kind of like finance bros, but Tantra.
Wow.
Yeah, because you have this knowing and you know how to use your sexual energy to create what you want, right? And it's natural for one's ego to feel like they're more special because they've awakened this thing that your average Joe down the street doesn't even really know about, right? So you almost feel special in a way. When you're working with the Kundalini, you need to understand that this is a divine intelligence. She is going to be nurturing. She's also going to give you the lessons that you need to learn. And they're not always going to feel nice and they're not always going to feel good because that's something that you need to go through in order to do the healing, in order to grow and expand your consciousness and hold a space where you're compassionate and non-judgmental for yourself and for others. So I say that to say, check yourself before you want to go and do these types of practices because it will change your life in the best way. And it's equally up to you to make sure that you're living a life that's in alignment with that. We call that integration.
So many things to touch on after this. Wow, I'm just so in awe. Thank you so much for sharing all of it.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
But yeah, so to start on my mental list of questions.
Go for it.
Where was I? Oh yeah, the intention. I just also wanted to draw attention to it because, as you said, this is the divine intelligence.
Yeah.
If you think you're more intelligent than this, think again. And intention matters in any kind of spiritual work so much.
Yes.
Because, I mean, first of all, it has all sorts of karmic implications.
Yeah.
But the result will depend on your intention. And yeah, I just want to urge people out there, any spiritual or energetic work, you need to be very careful and very mindful. This is serious stuff. You need to have huge respect, as you were saying. It's not just something to be joked and played around with. This is this is a divine thing that was given to us, and we should be very mindful of how we work with it. So thank you so much for bringing that awareness to it. Yeah. So you mentioned once we awaken it, there's also practices to keep it awakened. Could you share a little bit more about that? What practices can we do to keep it awakened, and why do we need to keep it awakened?
So I would say you don't need to keep it awakened if you don't want to. But essentially, once you have awakened it, it's almost like you have this deep feeling of joy, for example, during an actual activation. Again, when I'm speaking, it's only about Kundalini activation transmissions. It's not about Kundalini yoga or Kundalini breathwork because I can't really talk too deeply about that, aside from just making sure that you're working with someone that is trained in that space for when you are going through that awakening process. Because I just wanted to say that one of the myths, and we'll probably get into it in a moment, but one of the myths around it is that awakening your Kundalini is dangerous. And to that, I would say that's not true, simply because how do I describe it? It's not true because it's in the essence of who you are. So if you're looking at it from a Western mind of, say, for example, you awaken it and then you go into a deep depression because you're unable to kind of hold the energy up, which happens to all of us, by the way, is that may look like you're going through a massive breakdown. But what could actually be happening is that you are breaking down, but you're breaking down part of your ego. You're learning new things, you're evolving, you're transforming. And so it's dangerous when you're not working with someone that's trained. If you're busy in your bedroom watching YouTube videos of how to activate your own energy, then I don't know how you're going to manage that yourself, because it's such an intense process when you're doing these practices like the breath work, like the yoga, etc. So it's better to do it with someone that actually knows what they're doing and that can guide you through that process.
I completely agree. And to the point that it's dangerous. I have myself, I think I told you before, I have read a couple of stories, more horror stories about Kundalini not even activation, maybe just awakening.
Yeah, I think it's the awakening more than the activations.
Yeah, they were just quite frightening, to be honest. That's kind of something that just like put me on alarm a little bit. But it makes sense that if that's something so vast and so powerful that's awakening, that it needs to take space.
Yeah.
And the way how the space is created by other things being cleared out. So maybe even the way how I see it is that there's just a creation of space when people are breaking down and having those intense moments.
Totally. And I would say that only, when we're practicing Kundalini activations, during these transmissions, we say, there are contraindications, for example. So if you're someone that is suffering with serious mental health and you've got psychosis and you're on very heavy meds, then don't work with the Kundalini energy, simply because your medication is there to actually help keep you in a stable mindset. But if you suddenly come off it and you're now elevating your Kundalini frequency to another one, your mindset might not be able to cope with it. But for example, if it is things like mild depression, anxiety, even ADHD, my client that had a spinal issue, he had ADHD, and funnily enough, we also say that before you actually come into doing a transmission, that you can't smoke or have caffeine or take any drugs 48 hours before, 48 hours after. Some practitioners say 24, but I would advise 48. And no alcohol as well. And I remember having a call with him because he wanted to join the cohorts. And I said to him, I explained, this is how the energy works, but also this is how you need to prepare your body. And he said, Kiren, I smoked ever since I was a young boy, ever since I was 16 years old. I've never not smoked. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do that. And I just said to him, well, I understand that. And this is essentially to allow the energy to move through you more clearly. And so if smoking is something that's quite hard for you not to do, even if it is for 24 hours, for example, then I would say sit with the information that I'm sharing and see how you want to proceed moving forward. I'll never force someone to have an activation because it has to come from within. And there's a reason that you'll find the calling, just like I had the calling, just like he had the calling to inevitably join. And my favorite thing about this particular client, he's so wonderful because he equally had ADHD and he wasn't sure how to manage the energy through the transmissions. And I said, again, sit with it and see how you feel. At the end of the day, it's up to you. And he came to me, joined the program for 4 weeks, and at the end he shared that A, his ADHD symptoms were a lot milder, and B, he hadn't smoked throughout the whole process.
Wow.
He literally gave up, and that was it.
He gave up after the first Kundalini activation?
He gave up before that.
Wow.
To prepare his body, he was like, I'm not going to smoke. And then after, he just didn't feel like smoking anymore. So this is what I say, this is the power of the Kundalini energy, because it will change your vibration. Smoking, drinking, all of that good stuff. Well, not good stuff, but you know what I mean. All of those things are there to distract ourselves in our mind. And so through changing our vibration, we find that actually we're not in resonance with that anymore. And that in itself is very beautiful. And I had a catch up with him a couple of weeks after, and I think it was about 8 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I was like, how's it going? How are you feeling? And he was like, yeah, I'm more energized. I'm just so surprised that it's still like this. I thought I was going to go through cold turkey with smoking. And I was like, have you picked up smoking again? He said, no, I haven't touched it.
You should put it as like the top kind of warning. By the way, you might give up smoking. You might give up alcohol. You might give up all your vices.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Maybe, yeah. So coming back around to the question that you had at the beginning, how to keep it elevated, how to keep the energy awakened, through the various practices. So for example, through Kundalini Activation transmissions, having another activation to keep your energy within that space, and making sure that you're really going through the integration process in a way that works for you. So what we call integration is, for example, your Kundalini was here and now you've raised its vibration to be up here in alignment with divine energy. And so your physical body, your subtle bodies, your emotional bodies are all like trying to catch up with that now, because you've just been exposed to this and now the rest of you is trying to catch up. And so it's in this movement over here with my hands is the integration. So ensuring that the energy is now being integrated within your day-to-day life. So some people after a transmission may feel like they want to run a marathon. Some people may feel like they need more sleep. Some people feel like they're craving certain foods. Some people feel like, oh, I want to eat more fruits and veggies. You may find that more emotions come up. It's all good. Like, we don't ever say anything's good or bad in this phase, because essentially there's just more clearing that's happening in this time. And we say that the magic doesn't happen during the transmission. I mean, it does to an extent, but the real magic happens during the integration period as you go on about your day-to-day life. And so I always say to my clients, ground, do your meditation, do your journaling, journal what you're feeling, what you're going through, so you can really bring it around full circle and feel embodied within the practice that you just encountered. Just to bring it around in terms of the guidance of what you should and shouldn't do before and after a Kundalini activation transmission. In terms of the dangers, the only one that I've truly heard of is where someone has taken a psychedelic after having a Kundalini activation transmission because they wanted to be more in the energy. And we always say never, ever take any drugs of any kind, you know, because you don't know how it's going to alter your states of consciousness. So when you're doing something like a psychedelic and your vibration's gone up here, and then you've taken a psychedelic, that's going to completely alter your state of consciousness because you don't know what it's going to do now. It could very well bring you into a state of psychosis. And so with that, I would say is probably the most dangerous aspect of awakening your Kundalini, because if you're not going to pay attention to the rules, I would say the rules, and giving it respect and being a bit humble about it and just constantly wanting to be in the energy but doing things that are out of alignment with that, then you could go into that state. And it will take a little bit of time for you to come back down into your body because now your mind is so out of this world, you don't even know where you are. And so as a Kundalini activation facilitator, I always say to the people, be mindful of why you're working with the energy, and please ensure that you're being respectful to your own body by following these rules, because it's for you, you know. And I would say, as a facilitator, I've not done a psychedelic after an activation. I would never ever do anything like that. But for example, I've taken tobacco after a transmission just to see how my body feels. I've taken alcohol after a transmission just to see how my body feels. Because if I'm saying to someone, my clients, don't do this, don't do that, and I understand what the repercussions are, I wanted to know for myself what would that be like. And I promise you it's not worth it. Because for example, I keep saying, you've elevated your frequency to such a high vibration that something like alcohol is one of the lowest vibrational forms that you can consume. Boom, I felt very low the next few days because I have just brought my vibration to this high state, and now I'm sinking it back down. And it's not going to go to a base level of where Kiren was at before the transmission. No, it's going to go below that.
Do you think that's because you were just more receptive and more sensitive to everything? So as soon as you've introduced something that's so low in vibrations, it just shoot you right back there down?
It's a good question. I think it's just the nature of how alcohol is. You know, even if you aren't having a Kundalini activation and you go on a drinking binge, or you have a drink the night before, for example, not even anything to do with Kundalini activation at this point, but on a day-to-day basis, especially living in London, there's a huge drinking culture here, right? You never feel good the next day. Let's be honest. I don't know anyone that feels like they're 10 out of 10 after having a drink. And so it's just the nature of the substance. And so that's why I say just be mindful of what your body is consuming. And this is one of the ways that you can keep your vibration high, by having life-giving foods like prana, foods such as fruits, vegetables, high vibrational foods like that, through avoiding substances like alcohol, like nicotine, like caffeine where possible, doing your actual practices like meditation, the journaling, and grounding. Grounding is so, so important when it comes to working with this energy, because like I said, you will have like this out of body amazing experience when you're in a transmission, because it will naturally happen when you're connected to that oneness, because that is what the source of the energy is from. But when you, again, have to integrate into day-to-day life, it's so important to be back into nature, grounding with your feet, doing your breath work, and just allowing yourself the compassion and the space to go through whatever it is you need to go through. It's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. And I really want to crush that as a myth, that energy healing is always something that's painful and quite dark, because it isn't always like that. And it isn't always going to be light and love and pure joy. It's duality. We have to understand that life is like that. And wherever we are in our human nature, with our life experiences, with our past lives, with any habits that we've accumulated in this lifetime, and so on, our experiences are going to be so different. And it's okay, because it's just allowing us to go through that in order to get to a state of neutrality, where you're able to handle life with a bit more balance, no matter what the highs or the lows are. That is really the main point of working with an energy like this. So it allows you to be in a state of balance whenever anything does happen. So you're able to look at it from a very neutral view.
Cool. Do you want to touch on in the last few minutes on anything in particular?
I guess my closing thing is that Kundalini is for everyone. You do not need to look a certain type of way or be a certain type of way or have a specific financial background in order for you to access this energy. It is beautiful, it is divine, and it's everyone's birthright to have this awakened within us, to bring us more in alignment with who we truly are and shedding all of the things that don't actually serve us, including our egos to an extent. And I just wanted to share during a transmission what happened. I don't think we necessarily spoke about this, but in too much depth. But you can do mudras, you can do yoga poses. There's so much that can happen during a transmission.
As in, you can do them consciously or unconsciously?
It's a combination of both, because I don't want to say it's an unconscious thing. It's just something that naturally happens. So for me, when I'm self-activating, and this is what can also happen when you're working with the energy, you can self-activate the more you do it. And so you can go through a process of where you're meditating or listening to some of the soul invoking music, and you'll find that the energy just wants to move and flow through you. Like I said at Kirtan, sometimes it just happens and you can control it. It's not like it takes over you, but you're mindful, you're conscious of it. You can understand, but you're allowing it. And that's what the meaning of surrender really is, because you're just surrendering to yourself. And often with some of these energy healing practices, there's something for you to do. Whereas I find, like with Kundalini Activation transmissions, it's probably one of my most favorite things, because all I have to do is lie on a mat for an hour, play some good music, and allow the energy to do whatever it is that it needs to do within me, and I can trust that. And often that can be the most challenging thing, quietening our mind, not judging ourselves during the process, and just allowing things to be, relinquishing control and just surrendering and knowing that actually everything that's going to happen is going to be in my greatest alignment. And when we speak about intention, as we were talking about before, I always say to my clients during a session, like, set an intention of what you want from this. What do you want more of in your life? What do you want less of? And let go with the knowledge and trusting that the universe has heard you, universe, God, whatever you want to call it, has heard you, and it's already giving it to you, because that is your divine birthright, and you are being divinely held in this moment, in this transmission. So you can just surrender and trust and relax.
Wow, incredible. Kiren, thank you so much for sharing all of it and coming on and being so patient with my questions and being so thorough in your explanations. Where can people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram at innerglowwithkiren, and you can also find me on my website at kirenbardwa.com/Kundalini, but I also do coaching, so you're welcome to contact me in any way, shape or form through those mechanisms.
Amazing. Thank you so much.